Welcome back to class. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that involves less leg room than a shoebox, and of course, a carbon footprint the size of a small country. I am talking about short-haul flights. The modern miracle that allows you to pay 10 euros for a ticket and then 40 euros just to bring your own backpack. We tolerate the endless security lines, the distant airport terminals, and the chaotic boarding process. It feels like a competitive contact sport, and we endure it all in the name of speed. But what if I told you the European Union has a completely different vision for the future of regional travel? They are trying to replace all of that airport misery with the civilized, scenic, and significantly more spacious experience of train travel. The motivation behind this massive bureaucratic shift is quite simple. It all comes down to the European Green Deal. The transport sector is responsible for a massive chunk of Europe's greenhouse gas emissions, and aviation is the fastest-growing source of those emissions. A short-haul flight generates exponentially more carbon dioxide. Compare that to a high-speed electric train, and the difference per passenger kilometer is staggering. If the EU wants to hit its climate targets, these short flights have to go. France was the first to boldly take action. They introduced a law aimed squarely at domestic short-haul flights. The law banned these flights if a viable rail alternative exists. Environmentalists cheered across the continent. It sounded revolutionary, but as with all things involving French politics and EU regulations, there was a catch. The devil was hiding deep within the bureaucratic details. The ban only applies if the train journey takes less than 2.5 hours, and it only applies to direct routes with sufficient daily frequencies. Because of these incredibly strict conditions, the impact was minimal. The Grand French ban actually only affected 3 specific flight routes out of Paris. Connecting flights were completely exempt from the ban. So, if you were flying through Paris to get to Madrid, you could still take the short flight. But do not mock it just yet. This was a vital, legal precedent for the entire European Union. The European Commission approved the move, signaling to other member states that banning short flights is legally possible under EU law. So why does the EU not just ban short flights continent-wide and force everyone onto trains right now? Because Europe's railway system is arguably one of the most complicated historical messes on the entire planet. You see, unlike airplanes, which just need a flat piece of asphalt to land, trains rely on physical, permanent infrastructure. And historically, every European country built their railway tracks differently, usually to prevent their neighbors from invading them easily by train. The most fundamental problem is the track gauge. That is the physical distance between the 2 rails on the ground. Most of Europe uses the standard gauge, but Spain and Portugal use the broader Iberian gauge. For a long time, crossing from France into Spain meant the train literally had to stop at the border. Passenger cars had to be hoisted into the air by massive cranes to have their wheels swapped before they could continue. We eventually fixed that with variable gauge trains, but the bureaucratic nightmare does not stop there. Let us talk about electricity. Even if the tracks are exactly the same width, the power lines above them operate on entirely different voltages. Belgium uses 3,000 volts direct current. Germany uses 15,000 volts alternating current. When a train crosses the border, it historically had to stop and swap locomotives entirely, causing massive delays. To fix this, companies now build multi-system locomotives that can handle different electrical currents automatically. They are brilliant pieces of engineering, but they are also incredibly expensive to build and painfully slow to get certified. Then there is the signaling. Every country has its own historical system of traffic lights and speed controls for trains. A green light in one country might mean something entirely different, just a few kilometers across the border. In the past, a cross-border train had to be fitted with the safety systems of every single country it planned to traverse. The dashboard looked like a chaotic museum of electronics. The European Union's solution to this is ERTMS. ERTMS stands for the European Rail Traffic Management System. It is a unified digital signaling system. It uses cellular data to communicate with trains anywhere in Europe, completely bypassing the old physical traffic lights. ERTMS is phenomenal. It is also astronomically expensive, and retrofitting thousands of kilometers of ancient tracks is taking decades. But the most uniquely European problem is the language barrier. This is something airlines figured out a long time ago. In aviation, every pilot and air traffic controller in the world speaks English. It is the mandatory global standard, not in rail. The rules stipulate that a train driver must be perfectly fluent in the language of the country they are driving through. If you want to run a train from Amsterdam to Milan, your driver needs to speak Dutch, German, and Italian perfectly. Or you have to stop the train and swap drivers at every single border crossing, which wastes time and money. Let us assume a train company overcomes the tracks, the electricity, the signals, and the languages. Now they face the final boss. The ticketing system. Booking a cross-border flight takes exactly 3 minutes on any aggregator app. Booking a cross-border train trip often requires navigating 3 different national railway websites, none of which talk to each other. State-owned rail operators act like jealous dragons hoarding their data. They do not want to share real-time delays or ticket inventories. They refuse to share this data with third-party apps because they fiercely fear losing their local monopoly. Enter the Multimodal Digital Mobility Services Regulation, a very boring name for an EU initiative that forces operators to share their data. The goal is that one day you can open a single app, type in Madrid to Berlin, and buy one unified ticket. This unified ticket would protect your passenger rights if any of your connections are delayed. Just like flying, we also cannot ignore the economics. For decades, aviation has enjoyed a massive, highly controversial advantage. Airline fuel, known as kerosene, is heavily exempt from taxation across the globe thanks to old international treaties. Meanwhile, train operators have to pay track access charges. Every time a train runs, it pays a toll to the infrastructure manager. This creates a completely skewed market. Planes, which pollute the most, fly virtually tax-free, while clean electric trains are taxed at every step. To fix this, the EU is investing heavily in the TEN-T, the Trans-European Transport Network. It is a master plan to connect all major European cities with high-speed rail by 2050, funding massive missing links like base tunnels. And this brings us to the romantic revival of the night train. As short flights become less attractive, sleeper trains are returning. Why waste a day sitting in a sterile airport when you can fall asleep in Vienna and wake up rested in the center of Paris? Competition on the rails is lowering prices and improving service quality. The EU's goal to replace short flights is not a pipe dream. It requires standardizing voltages, translating manuals, and fighting state monopolies. But eventually, the golden age of rail will return to Europe. The next time you find yourself squished in a budget airline seat, remember, Brussels is trying to get you a train ticket. Class dismissed.